My name is Laura. I am 35 years old and have been married for a decade to Michael, the love of my life. When we met, I was captivated by his charm and determination. He was a hardworking man, dedicated to his profession as a truck driver. Soon after we were engaged, we decided to take the big step and got married in an emotional ceremony surrounded by family and friends. The first years of marriage were wonderful, even though Michael's work kept him away from home for long periods of time. I was in charge of keeping our home cozy, anxiously awaiting his return. Each time he returned, we celebrated our reunion with passion and love. However, as time went by, loneliness began to take its toll on me. The nights became endless, and the days became monotonous without his presence. I longed to have someone to share my joys, sorrows, and worries with. Sometimes I felt like my life was slipping through my fingers, while I clung to a love that was becoming more and more distant. One day, during one of his brief stays at home, Michael told me that he had invited his three best friends to stay with us while he was away. Charles, Diego, and Javier were like brothers to him, and he wanted me to get to know them better. At first, I thought it was a great idea, thinking it would be an opportunity to make new friends and fill the void I was feeling. But I never imagined how that decision would change my life forever. The day Michael's friends arrived, I was equal parts nervous and excited. I wanted to make a good impression and make them feel welcome in our home. Charles, Diego, and Javier were three attractive and charismatic men, each with a unique personality that captivated me from the first moment. That night, I decided to prepare a special dinner to entertain them. I took great care in every detail, from the choice of the menu to the decoration of the table. When we sat down to dinner, the atmosphere was filled with laughter, anecdotes, and a warmth that I had not felt for a long time. I let myself be enveloped by their sympathy and attention, feeling appreciated and valued as a woman. As the evening progressed and the wine glasses were emptied, I noticed how their gazes rested on me with a special glow. It was a hidden but undeniable desire. I felt flattered, and at the same time, a spark of emotion ignited inside me. It had been so long since I had felt desired in that way. I tried to deflect those thoughts, reminding myself that I was married and they were my husband's friends. However, a part of me longed to feel alive again, to experience the passion and adventure that seemed to have faded in my marriage. That night, I went to sleep with a mixture of guilt and excitement, unaware that I was about to cross a line that would change everything. The next morning, I got up early to prepare breakfast before the boys woke up. I wanted to surprise them with a feast of scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, and freshly made toast. As I stood in the kitchen humming a tune and lost in thought, I felt firm hands slide around my waist. Startled, I turned around and found myself face to face with Charles. His dark eyes were staring at me with intensity, and before I could react, he brought his lips to mine and kissed me passionately. For an instant, I froze, but then I let myself be carried away by the emotion of the moment. I tangled my fingers in his hair and kissed him back with the same intensity. We shed our clothes with urgency, leaving a trail from the kitchen to the dining room table. Charles lifted me up and sat me on the cool surface, kissing every inch of my skin. I surrendered myself to him without reservation, allowing his expert touch to bring me to an ecstasy I hadn't experienced in a long time. When it was all over, reality hit me hard. I had betrayed my husband. I had broken my marriage vows. Guilt washed over me, but at the same time, a part of me felt more alive than ever. I had awakened a fire inside me that I thought was extinguished, and now I didn't know how to put it out. We cleaned up the mess from our passionate encounter just in time before Diego and Javier came down for breakfast. I pretended to be normal, but inside my mind and heart were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. I knew I had crossed a line, but the temptation to feel wanted again was stronger than my sense of morality. After that first passionate encounter with Charles, I felt the need to escape the house and clear my thoughts. I decided to go for a walk in the nearby park, hoping that the fresh air and contact with nature would help me find some inner peace. As I wandered through the tree-lined paths, I bumped into Diego.
Seeing him there with his charming smile and warm gaze made my heart race. We greeted each other and began chatting as if we were old friends. I found his presence comforting and, at the same time, exciting. As the conversation flowed, I discovered in Diego a sensitive, intelligent, and funny man. We shared our dreams, fears, and hopes, finding a special connection that went beyond physical attraction. It was as if we had known each other all our lives. At one point, Diego took my hand and looked into my eyes with intensity. He invited me to join him in his hotel room, promising me an unforgettable evening. I knew I was playing with fire, but the temptation was too strong. Almost without thinking, I accepted his proposal and we headed to the hotel. Arriving at his room, we let ourselves be carried away by unbridled passion. We kissed urgently as we shed our clothes. Diego gently laid me down on the bed and began to explore every corner of my body with his lips and expert hands. He made me feel adored, desired, and completely satisfied. We gave ourselves to each other without reservation, forgetting about the outside world and the consequences of our actions. At that moment, only the two of us existed, fused in a passionate embrace, letting ourselves be carried away by the pleasure and connection we had found. After our encounter, I was once again overcome with guilt. I had betrayed my husband again, this time with another of his best friends. I felt lost and confused, but at the same time, I could not deny the attraction I felt for these men. It was as if I had awakened a part of me that had been dormant for a long time. I returned home with my heart divided and my mind in turmoil. I knew I was walking a dangerous path, but a part of me longed to continue exploring those forbidden feelings. The temptation was too strong, and I was too weak to resist. That night, I was alone in my room, trying to fall asleep after the day's events. My mind was flooded with conflicting thoughts and mixed emotions. On the one hand, I felt a deep guilt for having betrayed my husband not once but twice. On the other hand, I could not deny the excitement and desire I had experienced in Charles and Diego's arms. Suddenly, I heard a soft knock on the door. I got out of bed, intrigued, and when I opened the door, I found Javier. He had a serious expression on his face, and I could notice some discomfort in his posture. He asked me if he could come in, as he wanted to talk to me about something important. Once inside the room, Javier began to apologize if his friends had disrespected me or made me feel uncomfortable in any way. He assured me that he would never dare cross that line, and that he valued my friendship and Michael's very much. His words touched me and made me feel even guiltier. I assured him that everything was fine and that he had nothing to worry about. However, as we talked, I could notice how his gaze drifted to my lips and how his breathing quickened slightly. Moved by an irrepressible impulse, I approached him and kissed him softly. Javier was surprised at first, but quickly reciprocated the kiss with the same tenderness. We let ourselves be carried away by the moment, exploring our bodies with delicacy and passion. Unlike the passionate and unbridled encounters with Charles and Diego, with Javier it was a more intimate and emotional experience. We took our time discovering each other, kissing every inch of skin and whispering words of affection. We made love slowly, savoring every moment of pleasure. When we climaxed together, we stayed in each other's arms, enjoying the warmth of our intertwined bodies. However, reality soon hit us. Javier apologized for getting carried away and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized that I had fallen into a spiral of deceit and betrayal. I had succumbed to temptation with my husband's 3 best friends, and now I didn't know how to get out of that emotional entanglement. I felt lost, confused, and racked with guilt. I knew I had to make a decision, but I feared the consequences of my actions. How could I look Michael in the eye after what I had done? How could I forgive myself for betraying our love and our marriage vows? I fell asleep in tears, begging to find a way out of the maze of emotions I had gotten myself into. After that night with Javier, my life became a whirlwind of emotions and lies. For the next month, I continued to see Charles, Diego, and Javier on the sly every time Michael went on a trip. It was as if I had developed an addiction to the excitement and pleasure those forbidden encounters gave me. Every time Michael left, I would make excuses to get away from home and meet up with one of them. Sometimes it was an innocent coffee in a discreet place. Other times, we would end up entangled in hotel sheets, letting ourselves be carried away by unbridled passion, the footsteps approaching down the hallway. It was only when the bedroom door burst open that we realized we were no longer alone. There, standing in the doorway, was Charles, my husband, his face twisted with shock and pain. His eyes were riveted on us, taking in every detail of the scene unfolding before him. My naked body entangled with Xavier, the sheets tossed, the air charged with passion and guilt. In that instant, I felt my world crumbling around me. Charles's expression went from disbelief to anger and then to a pain so deep it pierced my soul. I could see in his eyes how something inside him broke, how the trust and love that once bound us together shattered at the evidence of my betrayal. "How could you, Paula?" whispered Charles in a trembling voice as tears began to roll down his cheeks. "How could you do this to me, to our marriage?" I wanted to say something, to find the right words to explain the inexplicable, to beg his forgiveness and swear that it had all been a terrible mistake. But the words got stuck in my throat, choked by the guilt and shame that invaded me. Xavier, for his part, got out of bed, trying to remain calm despite the palpable tension in the air. "Charles, I know this is difficult, but please let me explain," he started to say. But Charles interrupted him with an angry shout. "I don't want to listen to your explanation, Xavier," he spat, his fists clenched and his face red with anger. "You're my friend, my pastor, and you have betrayed my trust in the worst possible way. How could you take advantage of my wife while I worked to give her a good life?" Charles's words hit me like a punch in the gut. I knew he was right, that I had betrayed our trust and our marriage vows in the most vile and selfish way possible. At that moment, I saw clearly the irreparable damage I had caused, not only to my marriage but also to the friendship Charles and Xavier had shared for so many years. "Charles, please let me explain," I pleaded, trying to get closer to him. But Charles stepped back, looking at me with a mixture of repulsion and pain. "I don't want to hear anything from you, Paula," he said in a cold, cutting voice. "You have destroyed our marriage. You have trampled on my love and my trust. I no longer recognize you. I no longer know who you are." With those words, Charles turned and walked out of the room, leaving me plunged into an abyss of despair and guilt. I heard his footsteps walking away down the hallway, followed by the slam of the front door as it closed. I collapsed on the floor, my body shaking with uncontrollable sobs. Xavier tried to comfort me, but his presence only added to my anguish and embarrassment. I knew I had crossed a line of no return, that I had destroyed everything I had ever loved and valued. At that moment, as I lay on the floor of my room, surrounded by the wreckage of my shattered life, I understood the magnitude of my actions. I had lost my husband, betrayed my vows, and destroyed the trust that once bound us together, all for a moment of selfish passion, for the pursuit of an illusory happiness that was now turning to ashes in my mouth. That was the moment when my world completely collapsed, leaving me plunged into an abyss of pain and regret. I knew that I would have to face the consequences of my actions, that the road to redemption would be long and tortuous. But at that moment, as tears streamed down my face and the weight of my betrayal crushed my soul, I could only think of the love I had lost and the irreparable damage I had caused. After Charles discovered my infidelity, my life became a chaos of emotions and consequences. My husband left home, unable to bear the presence of the woman who had betrayed him in the most cruel and merciless way. I was left alone in that house that had once been our home, surrounded by the memories of a love that I myself had destroyed. Every corner, every object seemed to mock me, constantly reminding me of the price of my selfish actions. Xavier tried to console me, promising me a future together, assuring me that our love would overcome any obstacle. But I knew that nothing could erase the damage I had caused, that no promise could rebuild what I had destroyed with my own hands. I felt lost, plunged into an abyss of guilt and regret. I spent sleepless nights crying until I ran out of tears, reliving again and again the moment when Charles discovered us. The expression of pain and betrayal on his face. I tried to communicate with him, to beg his forgiveness, to promise him that I would change and that I would do anything to repair our marriage. But Charles refused to listen to me, to give me a second chance. For him, I had crossed a line of no return and had destroyed the trust and love that once united us. Days turned into weeks, and the reality of my situation began to settle in like an unbearable weight on my shoulders. I had lost my husband, betrayed my marriage vows, and destroyed my own. After that fateful night when Michael discovered me with Charles, my life became absolute chaos. My husband left the house, taking with him not only his belongings, but also my heart and my dignity. I was left alone, plunged into a deep abyss of pain and regret. The days that followed were hell. Michael refused to answer my calls and messages, making it clear that he wanted nothing more to do with me. His friends Charles, Diego, and Javier also disappeared from my life as if they had never existed. I felt abandoned, betrayed, and completely lost. I had to face the accusing looks and malicious comments from family and acquaintances. The news of my infidelity spread like wildfire, turning my life into a media circus. I felt judged, singled out, and condemned by everyone, even by those who had once loved me. But worst of all was dealing with my own guilt and remorse. I couldn't sleep at night, tormented by the memories of what I had done. I would look in the mirror and not recognize the woman who looked back at me. I had betrayed my principles, my morals, and above all, the love of my life. I tried to seek solace in alcohol and pills, trying to numb the pain that consumed me inside, but nothing seemed to ease the burden on my shoulders. I felt lost, aimless, like a ship adrift on a raging sea. It was at that moment of total despair that I decided to seek professional help. I began to attend therapy, trying to understand the reasons behind my actions and find a way to forgive myself. It was a long and painful process, but little by little, I found the strength to face my demons and take responsibility for my mistakes. I also tried to reach out to Michael, not with the intention of getting him back, but to ask for forgiveness from my heart. I knew I had destroyed our marriage and did not deserve his forgiveness, but I needed to tell him how sorry I was for hurting and betraying him. To my surprise, Michael agreed to meet with me. In that conversation, I opened my heart to him and confessed everything I had learned in therapy. I told him about my insecurities, my loneliness, and how I had sought in others what I should have found in our love. I asked him for forgiveness 1,000 times, with tears in my eyes and my soul laid bare. Michael listened to me in silence, with a mixture of pain and compassion in his eyes. He told me that he appreciated my sincerity, and that he understood that I was suffering too. But he also made it clear that it was over between us, that he could no longer trust me, and that he needed to move on with his life. Those words hurt me to the core of my being, but I knew they were just. I had betrayed our love and our marriage vows, and now I had to accept the consequences of my actions. Heartbroken, but with a new understanding of myself, I accepted the divorce and set out to rebuild my life from scratch. Several years have passed since then, and although the road has not been easy, I have managed to find peace and forgive myself. I have learned to value myself, to be honest with my feelings, and not to look for in others what I should find in myself. I have also realized that true love is based on trust, respect, and loyalty, and that no passing fling is worth sacrificing that. Now, looking back, I see that stage of my life as a painful but necessary lesson. I learned from my mistakes, grew as a person, and found the strength to move forward. And although I know I can never get back what I lost, I have learned to value what I have and to be happy with myself. This is my story, the story of how one bad decision can change everything. But it is also the story of how, even in the darkest of times, there's always hope and the possibility of a new beginning. I only hope that my experience can serve as a lesson for others, so that they don't make the same mistakes I made and value what really matters in life. True love based on honesty, loyalty, and mutual respect. Do you think I deserve to find happiness again? Like and subscribe to read more stories like these.